The story begins with one of the characters gasping for breath and speaking in a broken voice, shouting out in a panicked call to his friends, as if in a state of terror or extreme exhaustion. In a frozen battlefield, a team of hunters was facing a terrifying creature that resembled a giant flower with teeth, while one of them appeared terrified, expressing that this raid was unbelievably brutal. One of them anxiously asked when reinforcements from the other guild would arrive, while another responded with uncertainty, saying he thought they were on their way, but didn't know exactly when they would arrive. One of the hunters was flipping through a glowing magical book, while the others screamed that if the situation continued like this, someone would surely die. But they were interrupted by the voice of this hunter, who commanded his teammates to retreat immediately, his face firm and resolute. In the next moment, dense red strikes rained down on the monster like a storm, causing it to let out a thunderous scream of pain, which astonished and frightened the observing group. One member, wearing a camera on his head, addressed the viewers excitedly, asking if they were seeing what was happening. A man appeared, floating in the air wearing a dark coat, and one of them exclaimed in surprise that it was the Hunter of Hunters, Jishin Baek, who looked confident and calm as he opened his glowing magic book. One of them was live streaming on his phone, commenting that it was the first time he saw him in person, confirming that he truly was the Hunter of Hunters. In another scene, a boy gazed absent-mindedly at the sky, wondering about the purpose of all this. Then he appeared standing at a graduation ceremony, staring at his phone, looking sad that his father didn't attend the event. One of his classmates noticed him alone and asked in surprise if he was by himself. When asked about his parents, the young Seong-hyun hesitantly replied that they were busy. His friend then asked him to take a family photo, and Seong looked at them quietly before agreeing. After taking the photo for them, he stood alone again, staring at his phone, as if sadness was returning to him. He was then seen standing alone in a narrow hallway, repeating to himself that his father was busy. Seong-hyun entered the house, where his mother greeted him by asking if he had returned. His mother appeared standing near the window, with exhaustion and concern evident on her face. It was then explained that his mother was taking care of his sister, who had been in a coma for a long time. The girl lay motionless on the bed, while the mother sat beside her with great care. He sat across from his mother and asked why she didn't attend his graduation ceremony, clearly saddened. His mother apologized, pointing out that he knew the reason well, explaining that she couldn't leave his sister's body unattended. Seong-hyun reacted angrily, asking why she only cared about his sister, insisting that it was just one day. He then turned toward the door in anger, shouting that it was unreasonable for all the attention to go to his sister alone. Suddenly his father appeared at the door with an angry face, and the son looked shocked by his sudden presence. His father, Shin Baek, asked how he returned so quickly, then reminded him that he had warned him before not to raise his voice at his mother. The boy lowered his gaze and said nothing, showing signs of regret or suppressed anger. Driven by anger, he began heading somewhere, but his father stopped him and asked where he was going, to which he replied that he was heading to the training hall. The father was surprised by his determination and repeated what he had told him many times before. The father told him coldly that with the abilities he possessed, he could never become a hunter, which made the boy freeze in place without replying. The scene began inside the training hall, where the young Seong-hyun charged at his opponent and mentor, using a wooden training staff, his focus clearly visible in his eyes. He faced his opponent, the active hunter Lee Jo-young, who owned the hall, and expressed his admiration for the level of enthusiasm Seong-hyun showed on this particular day. The battle between them intensified, and they exchanged blows with speed and precision, while it was clear that Seong-hyun was doing his best to demonstrate his progress. Suddenly he leapt back, activating his special ability, which summoned glowing chains that wrapped around his arms in a flash, catching his opponent off guard. He rushed forward with those chains, trying to bind and take down his opponent, with a look of certainty in his eyes that he had landed a hit. But in a sudden move, Lee Jo-young unleashed a tremendous burst of energy that shattered the chains, sending vibrant colors exploding outward with force. Seong-hyun froze in place, staring at his disintegrated chains, the shock on his face revealing how weak their impact had been. He was then hit by a counterattack that knocked him to the ground forcefully, followed by a blast of light energy that threw him even farther. Jo-young stood smiling, resting the training staff on his shoulder, saying the plan almost worked this time. But he immediately pointed out that the problem lay in the weakness of the chains, which weren't strong enough to actually restrain him. He then suggested to Seong-hyun that he might need to stop relying on his ability entirely if that was where the problem lay. The two then went to a restaurant to eat, where Jo-young tried to comfort him by saying he'd treat him to a black bean noodles meal. But Seong-hyun remarked that it didn't feel right to eat at the expense of someone who was also financially struggling, which sparked Jo-young's protest. And while they ate, Seong-hyun proposed they have another training round after the meal. This surprised Jo Young, who warned him of a potential stomachache if he did so, and added that he preferred to rest until the academy's test results were out. But Seong-hyun immediately rejected the idea. He shouted that the other competitors had multiple abilities or had returned from other worlds and could shoot fire or smash walls with ease. He added that his modest powers didn't qualify him to be a hunter at all, expressing his frustration and sense of helplessness. Then he recalled that the only way to earn his father's recognition was by becoming stronger, and that was what kept him going. He continued head lowered, saying he couldn't stay comfortably at home while holding on to this desperate need to prove himself. Jo Young looked at him calmly, a trace of hesitation or contemplation in his eyes. He softly told him that this was exactly why he advised him not to push himself so hard, calling his name with sympathy. He added that home and family should be a source of peace, and if one couldn't find comfort there, they would have no shelter in times of crisis. Outside, heavy rain was pouring down as a man in a green coat addressed the crowd in a loud voice. He said that monsters had appeared 100 years ago and had started entering the human world, disguising themselves as ordinary people. He then added that some claimed to have returned from other worlds and lied when they said this world was their home. He urged the crowd to tell these people that this world was not their true home. Meanwhile, Seong-hyun began recalling the image of his mother beside his comatose sister at home, the atmosphere thick with emotion. Jo Young appeared in a focused shot, saying that family should be the place where a person feels most at peace. And in the end, Seong-hyun stood in the rain, listening as someone shouted in the crowd that those monsters should return to the hell they came from. At that very moment, he received a message on his phone, informing him that he had not been accepted into Seonghan Academy, and a look of defeat washed over him. When things go wrong, and there's no way out, the only option left is to face it. These were the words that opened the scene, said in a gloomy, rainy atmosphere, accompanied by the distant sound of an angry voice shouting that all monsters must return to hell. Seong-hyun shouted in the crowd that this place was already a real hell, as people moved through the street under umbrellas, solemn expressions on their faces. He continued yelling emotionally, confronting this rejection, his voice trembling. Where the hell is he even supposed to go? Rain poured heavily as Seong-hyun sat outside the house, between shadow and light, surrounded by silence and relentless rain. He lowered his head, tears mixing with the rain, while his phone rang on the ground beside him and he didn't answer. After a while, he got up and picked up the phone, answering the call in a low voice, then appeared stunned by what he heard from the other end. He was then seen standing in front of a hospital room door, shocked by the surprise, saying to himself that what he was seeing was unbelievable. The girl, who had been in a coma for 12 years, was awake and sitting up in bed, as the doctor told him her health was excellent despite the long period. The mother sat beside her, overwhelmed with tears, asking Seong-hyun to greet his older sister, while the latter looked at him calmly. The mother addressed everyone, saying the family must stay by her side because she was feeling anxious. She asked Seong-hyun to take turns caring for her, but he responded that he had many things to do, and that graduation didn't mean he suddenly had free time. The discussion escalated, and the mother said that regardless, she was still his sister. The young man snapped back that he didn't even remember talking to her once, and questioned how she could be his sister if he didn't even know her. The father intervened angrily, demanding he watch his words. Seong-hyun responded with bitter sarcasm, accusing his father of being the last person who had the right to speak about kind words. Amidst the tension, the girl clutched the bed cover and screamed in a trembling voice, begging them to stop. She said quietly that she didn't like this situation. She looked at them all and said she hated this tension, that it deeply disturbed her. Everyone stood in silence, and the mother tried to calm things down, gently telling her that everything would be all right. Seong-hyun was left standing alone in the shadows. Afterward, he began spending 3 days a week at the hospital beside his sister. His mother hoped the time would bring them closer, but he still felt a distance, even though he read beside her and tried to remain quietly present. Nevertheless, he didn't stop training. He kept practicing his chains, even in narrow alleyways, gripping them with seriousness and determination. But the result was shocking. His application to the academy was rejected, and the phrase "not accepted" always appeared on his phone screen. He stared at the words with sadness and silence, then walked down the inner hallway of the building with heavy steps, as if it no longer meant anything to him. He opened a door without hesitation and entered the quiet hospital room. When he looked at the empty bed, he sensed something was wrong and cried out in shock and panic. His sister had left the room and was sitting alone on a bench in the garden at night, silently thinking. Seong-hyun shouted as soon as he saw her, asking if she had been there for a while, startling her with his sudden outburst. He told her he had been looking for her everywhere, and asked how she left without saying anything. She apologized and said she felt suffocated in there. He asked if she could stay with him outside for a while instead of going back right away, and she was surprised by his question. He sat on the bench holding his phone, while she quietly sat beside him looking at him without saying a word. Finally, she asked him hesitantly if he hated her. She continued, saying that he seemed scarier than before, which surprised him, and he asked what she meant. She explained that he now resembled their father, and that he used to be kind in the past, but he replied in confusion, saying she was only 5 back then, and he barely remembered that time. The girl went on sadly, pointing out that their parents had grown older, her friends had changed their phone numbers, and she could no longer even attend school. She clenched her clothes tightly with sorrow, saying the feeling of loneliness had suddenly overwhelmed her without warning. She began to cry, expressing how alone she felt, as if she were completely alone in this world. Seong-hyun recalled an image of himself standing alone in the middle of a crowd and truly listened to his sister's words about the meaning of loneliness, even when surrounded by people, which drove him to respond emotionally, insisting that what she said made no sense. He told her she couldn't possibly be alone. She had a mother, a father, and she had him too. He then tried to encourage and comfort her, explaining that she could always make new friends, even if she couldn't go back to school. He reassured himself that what he said was actually true. He began thinking that entering the Hunter Academy wasn't the only path to becoming a hunter, using his friend Jo Young as an example, who never attended school and still became a hunter. He made up his mind and resolved that it was still too early to give up. His sister thanked him for his kind words, and he suggested returning home, but then suddenly asked in surprise how she got there without her wheelchair. In a sudden moment, she began to float in the air, surrounded by starlight, which left her brother utterly stunned. He asked in shock what was going on, and she calmly replied that she had gone to the fairy realm during her sleep. She explained that she had learned the ability to fly there. Seong-hyun began remembering news about people returning from other worlds, and his father's recent words, telling him he couldn't become a hunter with his current talent, and his sister now flying with her newfound abilities. At that moment, he felt both awe and unease at what he was seeing and remembering. He flashed back in time, remembering how their mother had screamed in surprise when she saw the 2 kids playing in the dirt, completely covered in it. The children joyfully told her they were simply playing in the dirt. She decided to bring them inside to bathe and eat, despite their protests that they wanted to keep playing. His little sister waved goodbye to her friend, promising to play with him again tomorrow. Seong-hyun thought to himself that everyone assumes tomorrow will come just like today, but for anyone the future is completely unknown. Then the memories flowed of him and his sister playing in the sand and their current-day selves, as if they were reflecting on their past. Scenes of everyday life followed, kids bathing, sitting with their mom around the table, one of them sleeping while the other watched TV. So-heen also remembered lying in bed, staring at the ceiling in the dark, thinking silently. She wondered to herself what she would play tomorrow, then gently closed her eyes, whispering the word, tomorrow. And thus the scene ended with her smiling face and glimmering eyes in the darkness, as if looking forward to a new tomorrow. Then So-heen saw a glowing fairy hovering above her bed, greeting her gently. The fairy excitedly told her that she had been chosen by their world. She invited So-heen to accompany her to help save the world together. So-heen spent a full 6 months in the fairy realm before returning to her original world. But when she returned, she was shocked to discover that 12 whole years had passed in the real world. Inside the hospital room, a group of people informed So-heen's family that she was indeed one of the returnees. One of them explained that the bracelet they gave her was meant to suppress the powers of the awakened, but it had no effect on her because she was a returnee. One of the officials asked So-heen what the fairies were doing in that world, and she replied that she learned many things from them. So-heen explained what she had learned, which included knowledge like how to use magic, what not to do, and survival skills. She continued saying she had also learned how to survive and deal with the fairy queen. She added that the fairies had told her the queen was very cruel, and that if she could confront and scold her properly, she would be allowed to return home. The man asked her skeptically if she had returned after killing the queen, to which So-heen responded emotionally, saying she didn't kill her. She explained nervously that she spoke with the queen and managed to resolve things peacefully, insisting that she carried no dangerous magic, but the man told her that returnees' abilities are extremely dangerous regardless. He added that all returnees are powerful people who manage to save another world and then return. The man told her directly that her power far exceeded that of an S-rank hunter. He warned that no matter how safe her abilities may seem, they would change in nature upon her return to the real world. The officials asked that her parents be responsible for monitoring her, to ensure she would not use her abilities again. So-heen was informed that a hunter from the bureau would come the next day to supervise her. Outside, Seong-hyun was seen walking alone, holding a paper in response to his inquiry. It stated that his physical stats were generally good, but his ability was completely unsuitable for fighting monsters. The chains he created were weaker and less durable than real chains, with no special properties, making them perform worse than even ordinary ones. For that reason, his ability was ranked F, the lowest among hunters. Seong-hyun sat in the hospital lobby, saddened, when a faint call of his name came from afar. So-hin approached him quietly, trying to comfort him by saying there was nothing to fear and no need to worry. But Seong-hyun replied with anger and deep sorrow, saying he meant what he said and that nothing had changed since the past. So-hin was stunned when Seong-hyun suddenly asked her to leave him alone and stay away from him. She asked in sadness and concern why he was saying that. She tried asking if what was bothering him was the fact that she was a returnee, but Seong-hyun exploded in anger, yelling at her to just go and leave him alone. So-hin stood in place, watching him walk away, as silence fell between them. The young Seong-hyun began walking alone through a crowd in the street, his face reflecting deep sorrow and distraction. As he walked, he recalled his sister's face when she asked if he hated her, and he sighed heavily, wondering to himself what he was even doing now. He continued walking among the people, who were whispering about him, puzzled, asking who he was and why he was among them. He then noticed a strange gathering and crowding of people, so he approached to find out the reason. To his surprise, he saw his father standing in the middle, his face smeared with blood and showing signs of extreme fatigue. The scene shifted to the hospital at night, where his sister sat on her bed, staring out the open window at the dark sky, her face marked by sadness and reflection. Elsewhere, Seong-hyun sat on the ground, his head bowed in deep grief, as if carrying a heavy burden inside. An old memory flashed in his mind, his joyful childhood playing in the sand, while his sister's eyes welled up with tears as she remembered those days. So-hin opened the window of her hospital room and jumped out, then began to rise and fly into the sky. Among the stars and under the moonlight, she landed gently in a strange place and began walking, surrounded by a glow of starlight. She stood in an abandoned courtyard covered with wild plants and tangled roots, and the place looked old and ruined. She recalled how the place looked in the past when it was new and orderly, and a look of longing and sadness appeared on her face. She wished to return to the old days, when life was simpler and happier with her family. She burst into tears, repeating her desire to return to those old times. She stood in the middle of the deserted place, telling herself that she was still here, that she hadn't disappeared. Suddenly she heard a sound behind her and turned around in fear, asking who was there. Two young men appeared, trying to calm her down, and instead asking who she was. One of them asked if she knew where she was, and the girl felt confused and anxious. The young men explained that this place had been closed off after a dungeon outbreak incident years ago, and warned her not to stay there. She replied hesitantly that she knew the way back, and didn't need their help. She tried to leave on her own, but suddenly received a hard blow to the back of her head, knocking her off balance and sending her to the ground. One of the young men approached her, saying he would take her with him, while his companion objected, questioning why he had struck her. On the ground, So-hin's hand began to move strangely and unnaturally, glowing with energy. The two young men noticed this with concern and surprise, and one of them remarked in shock that she was getting back up, despite the strong blow she had taken. So-hin stood up again, glaring at them angrily, while they were stunned by her ability to survive. One of them questioned whether his blow had any effect at all, while So-hin, with sorrow, wondered why she had been attacked in the first place. As the three young men approached her, she pleaded fearfully for them not to come any closer. She raised her hand in warning, and told them she would shoot if they moved closer. The young men mocked her, saying she seemed like an escapee from a mental hospital. In that moment, So-hin recalled the words of the fairy Cyan, who once held a magic book and spoke of new magical powers he wanted to teach her. The power of magical marksmanship, and her eyes began to glow with intensity and determination. So-hin began speaking as she aimed a glowing arrow, her voice shaky as she said there was no need to be afraid, because anyone hit by this arrow wouldn't die. She explained that those struck by the arrow would only turn to stone for a short period of time. In the next moment, a sudden powerful explosion lit up the area. Her mind echoed with the words of the official, who had warned her that the nature of her ability would change once she returned to this world, no matter how safe it once was. The young men who had attacked her were now shown with terrified, shocked expressions in reaction to the blast. Suddenly, So-hin realized that she had unintentionally killed one of them. His body was lying motionless on the ground. She raised her hand, stained with blood, and was struck with overwhelming shock and confusion over what had happened. Elsewhere, the young Seong-hyun was walking among a crowd of people, surprised and confused about why they had gathered this way. He then noticed that his father was standing at the center, his face bloodied and showing signs of serious injury. Seong-hyun began to wonder if the man who had been killed was the same one who appeared on the YouTube platform. The father suddenly noticed Seong-hyun standing in the crowd and turned to him with a surprised, concerned look. He approached his son and sharply asked why he had left his sister alone. Seong-hyun replied that he just wanted to take a short walk. His father continued, looking away, and asked his son if it was the first time he had seen a dead body. The son answered yes. The father explained that the death rate among hunters was 4 out of 10 last year, emphasizing how dangerous the profession was. He continued that 2 out of every 10 hunters suffer severe injuries, and 1 in 10 develops PTSD and quits entirely. The father firmly told his son that there are no exceptions to this reality, whether a person is a beginner or an expert. He sternly said that this is the nature of the world they live in, and then asked if his son truly believed he could survive in such a harsh world. The boy hesitated, unable to answer clearly. The father then asserted that hesitation is a sign of weak determination and lack of resolve. Later, Seong-hyun walked outside and gazed at the hospital building under the night sky, staring at the stars. He admitted to himself sadly that this was always the case. He felt weak and full of doubt. He recalled the chains he used and realized how truly weak his abilities were, though he had never wanted to admit that truth or the reality he lived in. He also remembered how, since childhood, he had watched famous hunters on TV with admiration and fascination. But now he no longer knew what he truly wanted. He asked himself, with visible sorrow, what it was that he really wanted to do with his life. Suddenly, he looked up at the sky and saw someone floating above him in a strange way. In surprise, he asked himself what was happening, and quickly realized that the person floating was his older sister. His shock deepened when he saw that her clothes were horrifically stained with blood, and signs of panic and worry began to appear on his face. He cried out in fear, asking her if she was hurt or injured, his voice clearly filled with concern. Seong-hyun began shouting in panic to his sister, asking what had happened to her, while she appeared in a state of shock and deep confusion. He recalled the warning words that returnees from other worlds could possess extremely dangerous powers. His sister, her voice trembling, asked him not to come any closer, which only deepened his worry and confusion. She screamed louder, pleading with him to stay away as she fell into a state of extreme panic. Seong-hyun looked at her with intense concern as energy began to surge from her uncontrollably. A massive explosion shook the surrounding area, with chunks of the ground flying everywhere due to her overwhelming power. A warning was broadcast through the hospital loudspeakers, announcing that a suspicious individual was causing a disturbance outside the building. Seong-hyun sat nearby in shock and confusion, hearing the warning announcement. His sister was shown screaming amidst swirling vortexes of magical energy, while the emergency broadcast continued, warning people not to leave the building. Seong-hyun stood, shouting at his sister, asking what she was doing and begging her to stop using her powers so recklessly and dangerously. He pleaded with her to stop immediately, but she replied through tears that she didn't want to stop. She screamed again, saying she didn't want to kill him, begging him not to come any closer. Seong-hyun screamed at the top of his lungs as he watched his sister's power spiral completely out of control. At that moment, the authorities announced via loudspeaker that the police had been called and everyone should remain inside the building, warning that the situation now warranted immediate execution at the scene. Seong-hyun began to feel terrified, wondering what he should do, whether to call his father or hope the police would arrive in time. Suddenly, Seong-hyun felt that he might be the only one who could do something in this situation. But when he looked at his own hands, he realized in fear and uncertainty that he was powerless to face his sister. He backed away in terror, repeating to himself that he couldn't defeat her. He decided to run, telling himself that he wasn't responsible for what happened. But he stopped suddenly, tears streaming from his eyes, overwhelmed with sadness over what he was doing. In a deep internal moment, he imagined himself as a small child sitting before him, asking what he truly wanted to do. He stood frozen in place, feeling his sister's energy still surging out of control around him. She, still hovering in the air, was crying and shouting desperately that she hated everything around her now. She screamed that she didn't want to do anything anymore. In a moment of total despair, Seong-hyun shouted his sister's name, trying to wake her from this horrifying state. He begged her to come back to her senses, and she, crying hard, called his name the moment she realized he was there. In his mind, he remembered his father's words about how cruel the world they live in truly is, and he answered himself aloud, saying he knew that well. He He affirmed, as he rushed toward his sister to save her, that sacrificing yourself to save others is what it truly means to be a hunter. He tried to calm her, shouting that her powers were only out of control because of her panic, assuring her that things would be okay if she could just calm down a little. While she, still crying, asked sorrowfully why all of this had happened. The girl, So-heen, wondered why her brother was putting in so much effort for her, even though she was no longer a little child. At that moment, she felt another hand gently holding hers and heard a soft voice asking her what was wrong. A white fairy then appeared, gently holding So-heen's hands, and with a calm smile, told her that she was the hero who had saved their world. So-heen responded with sadness that she wasn't a hero, just someone who looked grown up on the outside, but was still a child inside. She continued, speaking with deep sorrow, saying she had no friends and that she was a very dangerous person, even responsible for someone's death. The fairy Cyan tried to comfort her, assuring her that what she said wasn't true. She went on to say that there was at least one person who cared about her and was willing to risk his life for her, and that she had never seen anyone do such a thing for someone they hated. The fairy asked her to return to the place where she truly belonged. Out in the street, Seong-hyun was on his knees, exhausted, surrounded by police cars and flashing lights. So-heen rushed toward him and hugged him tightly, crying, while Seong-hyun looked at her with sadness and compassion. In his mind, he saw an image from his childhood, staring at a younger version of himself, and whispered to himself that he could do this. From a short distance away, one hunter asked in surprise if the other had just seen that young man, but the other replied that he hadn't. It was announced that the incident that night had been handled by the police, and that the event was so minor it wasn't even mentioned in the news. However, it was said that there was a much smaller story behind that event. Inside a small cell, So-heen sat alone wearing headphones until a guard entered and informed her that visiting time had arrived. She exited the cell accompanied by guards, dressed in prison clothes, her expression sad and emotionless. As she walked, she recalled the image of her mother sobbing bitterly, which deepened her guilt and pain. Upon arriving at the visiting room, she hesitated before entering and wondered what she should say. When she entered, she was surprised to find her father sitting there, and the two of them looked awkward and silent. She sat in front of him and began stammering as she tried to call him, but he interrupted her, saying he had come to get her out of prison today. He explained that the woman her mother had brought before possessed a special ability to read memories, and she had reviewed the memories of the incident So-heen was involved in. Her father said that the truth discovered by that woman was that the others had attacked her first, and that So-heen was merely defending herself. He clarified that her actions were entirely lawful under self-defense, and therefore she could not be punished for what happened. But So-heen remained hesitant and said with sorrow that someone had died because of her, and she couldn't easily move past that fact. The father continued speaking to his daughter, assuring her that the person she had shot did not die, and that he was now fine after being treated by individuals with special abilities in healing severe injuries. He emphasized that she hadn't killed anyone that day. The girl felt great relief and began to cry, repeating that this brought her so much comfort. The father looked at her in silence, also repeating to himself that he too felt relieved. A woman standing at the door asked him if he had finished his conversation, and he replied yes. As they walked down the corridor, the woman told him they weren't able to cover the full cost of the damage done to the hospital, and he would have to pay a fine to some extent. But he expressed his relief that it had ended this way and thanked her for her help. She replied that there was no need to thank her and that they all owed everything to the hunter Ji Shin-baek. She then asked if his daughter would be okay, especially since she would eventually learn the truth. She then quietly informed him of what really happened to the person his daughter had attacked, that he had in fact died. The father replied sorrowfully that he hoped his daughter would be more emotionally stable when she finally learns the truth. She handed him an envelope and said it was a document concerning his daughter. The father opened the envelope angrily and asked who would send something like this. Elsewhere, a man was shown casually eating snacks, appearing completely indifferent. In the training yard, Seong-hyun was practicing control over his chains, and he seemed to be doing so with great intensity. He was breathing heavily from exhaustion, while the same indifferent man sat behind him eating snacks. Seong-hyun, annoyed, asked who this man was, and another trainee replied that he didn't know either, that he'd been doing that all day, even after his day pass was cancelled. The man sitting down told Seong-hyun not to worry about him, and to keep doing what he was doing. But Seong-hyun angrily asked him to get rid of the snacks, because he couldn't concentrate with him there. The man asked if his lack of focus was because of him, and Seong-hyun, flustered, replied, yes, then asked if he would say the same thing during an actual fight. The man responded that these kinds of variables always happen in real combat. and if something like this bothers him that much, it only shows he's lacking in proper training. Seong-hyun approached the man and asked him hesitantly if they had met before, why he was picking fights with him from the start, and if he had any idea how hard he had been training. The man replied that he acknowledged Seong-hyun's physical potential and instincts, but added that his technical skills were very weak. He explained that the chains Seong-hyun created depended on the energy he expended, which meant he always had to burn a lot of energy to control them. He added that the excessive force in every move was why he lacked precision, and that professionals don't use strength in that way. The black-haired man tossed a snack into the air and then hurled it at Seong-hyun's face with incredible speed and force, leaving the young man stunned. The man turned confidently toward the others, asking if they understood what he had just done, while everyone stood in shock. The snack had scattered across the floor, strangely unharmed, which surprised the onlookers and showed the man's incredible precision. Seong-hyun wondered to himself if this man was someone unusual, especially after the man told him he still didn't know his true power. The man then handed Seong-hyun a strange device, explaining that it was used to detect returnees, and asked him to bring it close to his chains. The device reacted the moment it neared Seong-hyun's chains, and the man smiled, confirming what he had suspected all along. The man asked Seong-hyun if he clearly remembered what happened at the hospital with his sister. He added that he had personally seen how his sister had visibly reacted when his chains touched her. He explained that Seong-hyun's chains had completely suppressed his sister's powers, and he confirmed to Seong-hyun that he possessed a rare power, the ability to shut down the powers of returnees. Seong-hyun was stunned upon learning this truth about his own unique ability. The man explained that merely swinging chains around randomly didn't count as real training. Seong-hyun asked directly and bluntly who this man was. The man replied with full confidence that his name was Chae Ji-hyung, a hunter and professor at the Songhan Academy for Special Abilities. Ji-hyung then clearly announced that he had come today to recruit Seong-hyun. Seong-hyun asked in astonishment if he really meant the Songhan Academy. He expressed concern over having failed the entrance exam before, but Ji-hyung reassured him, saying he had the authority to recommend candidates directly. Ji-hyung told Seong-hyun that in his view, his powers were sufficient, and the final decision was his to make. He asked Seong-hyun if he truly wanted to join the academy. Seong-hyun responded with great enthusiasm and a loud voice, affirming his strong desire to go. Ji-hyung smiled and officially welcomed Seong-hyun into the Hunters Academy. He extended the official documents, formally welcoming Seong-hyun to the academy. Suddenly, at that moment, an envelope was hurled toward the papers in Ji-hyung's hand due to a surprise attack. Ji-hyung managed to catch both the papers and the envelope, remaining alert and prepared for the attack. Seong-hyun turned in shock to see another man entering the area through a strange red-lit portal. The newcomer, revealed to be the hunter Ji-shin Baek, spoke sharply, demanding that Ji-hyung explain what was happening immediately. He angrily asked what exactly he was planning. Ji-hyung responded with a sarcastic smile, saying that the question should really be coming from him, not the other way around. Ji-shin Baek began angrily demanding that Chae Ji-hyung explain what was going on, accusing him of deception. Seong-hyun stood in shock, confused, and wondering what had brought his father here. The two men exchanged sarcastic and tense words, with Ji-hyung commenting that the other's face had gotten more wrinkled since their last meeting. Ji-hyung tried to joke that if Shin Baek kept skipping their meetings, he might forget what he looked like. But Shin Baek, furious, told him to stop avoiding the subject and explain what was happening. Seong-hyun wondered internally if the two men already knew each other, while Ji-hyung clarified that he had simply submitted recommendation letters for both siblings. He continued by stating that the recommendation was for So-heen, whose ability equaled that of an S-rank hunter, and for Seong-hyun, who possessed a unique power. The father rejected this, saying So-heen was still the age of an elementary school student and couldn't possibly adapt to such an academy. Ji-hyung responded sharply, saying that surely Shin Baek had heard about what happened with So-heen. He added that her powers had gone out of control and described her as a ticking time bomb. He emphasized that she needed to study in a specialized institution and that he was capable of training her properly. The father, still firm in his position, turned his stern gaze to Seong-hyun, declaring that his son had no real talent. He explained to his son that the inevitable result of recklessness is death, and that he needed to understand that. Seong-hyun protested loudly, saying his father was wrong. Ji-hyung stepped in, supporting Seong-hyun, and stating that he had personally witnessed the young man's bravery when he risked his life to save his sister. Ji-hyung confidently asserted that Seong-hyun had the courage it takes to become a true hunter. But the father rejected this, calling what Seong-hyun did reckless, not courageous. He asked his son if he even knew exactly what his sister's ability was or how to control it when he intervened. Seong-hyun answered hesitantly, worried that if he hadn't stepped in, something terrible would have happened to her. The father firmly stated that his son was only lucky his power happened to work, not because of skill or strength. He added sharply that relying on luck in battle is the fastest way to die. He warned Seong-hyun that Ji-hyung was deceiving him and that the recommendation would give him no real advantage at the academy. Ji-hyung tried to defend himself, saying the academy did take recommended students seriously and threatened to report Shin Baek's interference to the headmaster. Seong-hyun wondered sadly to himself why his father treated him this way. He thought with deep sorrow, wishing his father would, just once, acknowledge that he had done something good. He painfully asked himself why no one could simply say that he had truly saved his sister. Overwhelmed by frustration and anger, he clenched his fists tightly, as if bottling his emotions inside. The training hall owner approached him and congratulated him with a smile, saying that the teacher had finally acknowledged him. Seong-hyun looked surprised when Jo Young told him that the professor had recognized his ability and that his dream was now closer than ever. He replied with hesitation and nervousness, saying it wasn't what it seemed, but his words trailed off, and he looked lost in thought. Jo Young interrupted, addressing the father, saying that things only get worse when the other person knows nothing about you. The father suddenly seemed to realize something important, muttering to himself that now he understood why the boy was so obsessed with becoming a hunter. He shouted angrily at Jo Young, accusing him of being the one who gave his son false hope. Suddenly, Jo Young appeared ready to attack the father, shocking everyone present. But they were interrupted by Seong-hyun's calm voice, thanking his friend and saying that he had come to his senses because of him. Seong-hyun began to speak quietly, admitting that in the beginning, he truly wanted to become a hunter like his father. He added that he had initially wanted to be exactly like him. Then he continued, explaining that all he really wanted was his father's acknowledgement, to prove himself and earn his recognition. His tone changed as he said that what happened that day at the hospital was completely different. In that moment, Seong-hyun felt that he wasn't weak or pathetic at all. He declared with confidence and clarity that he was now ready to pursue his goal. He shouted with all his strength and determination that he would become a hunter, even if it meant fighting his own father. His father's face showed both shock and anger upon hearing his son's words. He muttered quietly, as if confirming his earlier suspicions, saying he had known it all along. The father approached Seong-hyun, saying that words were no longer enough to convince him. He grabbed Seong-hyun by the shoulder and told him to find out for himself. Then, Seong-hyun, surprised, asked what he meant, and his father replied that he would discover whether this was truly the right path for him or not. The father then added that he had only 2 conditions to agree to his son's request. The first was that Seong-hyun must join the student council at the academy. He firmly stated that if he couldn't do that within 1 year, it would mean he was unqualified, and the father himself would bring him back home. Then he clearly stated the second condition, that Seong-hyun must protect his sister properly. He explained that her powers were unstable and that he had no choice but to send her with him to the academy, even though he was deeply uncomfortable about it. He instructed Seong-hyun to ensure his sister's academic performance, warning that if he failed in that too, he would bring him home as well. The father then asked sharply if Seong-hyun was truly capable of fulfilling those conditions. Seong-hyun responded with both excitement and nervousness, saying he could. The father left the area quietly after delivering his final words. Seong-hyun stood frozen in place, stunned, while the others around him wondered aloud whether his father had really left or not. After his departure, the father was seen walking down the street when a voice called out to him from a distance. Chae Ji-hyung approached him, scolding him for going too far by demanding his son join the student council. Ji-hyung added that all student council members were top students, and someone with an F rank like Seong-hyun had no chance of succeeding there. The father replied calmly, affirming that his son was the one who declared he would become a hunter, and he should be capable of achieving at least that much. He ended the conversation with sadness, telling Ji-hyung that he had never wanted to drag another person into this path. The young man began speaking calmly to Seong-hyun, advising him not to overthink and to choose the path he truly believes is right. He then added with confidence that he also trusted the path Seong-hyun had chosen. He assured him that he would support him on whatever path he takes, no matter what it is, even if it was the path he had walked all along. He told Seong-hyun that he didn't need others' approval, because the most important thing was believing in himself. Seong-hyun remembered that, in the beginning, all he really wanted was to be like his father. Elsewhere, Ji-hyung's face clearly showed surprise and emotion. Ji-hyung reflected with sadness and guilt that he had been the one to drag Seong-hyun into this difficult path. By the end of February, So-heen sat in her room, overjoyed as she held her recommendation letter for entry into Songhan Academy. Seong-hyun stood on a rocky cliff, training intensely with great focus and effort. In March, many students gathered in front of a massive ship, signaling a sudden new chapter. Seong-hyun, along with his sister, boarded a passenger ship headed for the Hunters Academy. In a flashback, a young boy screamed in shock, asking if the person in front of him was lying. The same boy screamed again in fear, begging for help, saying there were still people here. Then he shouted once more, with disbelief and anger, that the man in front of him was a hunter, and shouldn't act like that. The young man's soul, Subin, suddenly woke from a nightmare, gasping in fear. Another person in the room spoke to him, asking if he was okay after hearing him groan in his sleep. He asked if it was seasickness, but Subin replied that it wasn't, that he just had a bad habit while sleeping. The other young man assumed it was their first time meeting and guessed that Subin must be a new student. He introduced himself as Seon Bor-yom, a second-year student, and warmly welcomed him. Subin also introduced himself with a gentle smile. The ship began its journey across the sea toward the academy. On board, So-heen was surprised by the presence of many knives and strange tools, and she asked her brother about them. Seong-hyun laughed and told her he had taken a few useful tools from their father's drawer. So-heen, worried, asked what their father would do if he found out, but Seong-hyun tried to reassure her. Suddenly, So-heen decided to go out and explore the place, insisting on going alone. Seong-hyun tried to stop her, saying he was afraid of strangers, but she promised she'd call him if anything happened. Seong-hyun sat down, grumbling that it felt like he was raising a small child. Seong-hyun sat by the window, deep in thought, wondering if what they were about to do from now on truly mattered. Elsewhere on the ship, a blonde-haired young man stood gazing at the sky, confidently stating that the start of a new school term would be full of new encounters. He thought to himself that if he could befriend the talented new students, his academic life would be much easier, and they might even become useful connections in the future. Then a serious expression appeared on his face, and he told himself that thoughts like that were for amateurs. The blonde-haired student then addressed Seon Bor-yom with a sarcastic tone, saying it was obvious he was still a beginner. Bor-yom, visibly annoyed, asked him what exactly he was trying to say. The blonde student hesitated, replying that getting close to the new students was probably a good idea. He then stepped closer to Bor-yom and asked him to bring a cute girl next time instead of this situation, which angered Bor-yom, who called him a pervert. The blonde student continued to tease Bor-yom, telling him to try finding a girl this term, wondering aloud how he was still acting like a newbie despite being a second year. Bor-yom explained to Subin that this guy's name was John Woo-jin, and that he was always like this. Bor-yom told Woo-jin to go find someone himself, instead of asking him, but Woo-jin said he was already trying to find someone suitable. Woo-jin suddenly noticed a girl standing on the deck, trying to feed the seagulls, which caught his interest. The girl, So-heen, was complaining sadly that the seagulls were ignoring her and refusing to take her food. Suddenly she stumbled and dropped the food from her hand, but Woo-jin quickly and skillfully caught it before it fell. He returned the food to So-heen, who thanked him politely, though clearly nervous. Woo-jin then began talking about the seagulls, remarking that the food hadn't attracted them, but it definitely attracted something else. He smiled and asked So-heen if she was a new student and which division she had joined. Elsewhere, Bor-yom and Subin were watching the situation unfold, and Subin asked if things seemed to be going well. Bor-yom replied that it looked better than in the past. However, Subin thought to himself that So-heen probably wouldn't be able to escape from Woo-jin that easily this time. Subin then asked Bor-yom what he meant earlier when he mentioned that Woo-jin was a second year. Bor-yom explained that Woo-jin had joined last year but was still technically a first year because he failed. He added that Songhan Academy was known for being strict, and many students had already failed. Bor-yom also mentioned that some students get expelled and are forced to pay large amounts to re-enroll, and that everyone here seems to come from wealthy families. He explained that anyone who graduates from Songhan would never have to worry about getting a job in the future. But Subin expressed his doubts about whether such qualifications were really necessary to become a hunter. Bor-yom suddenly noticed something and curiously asked if So-heen and Woo-jin were heading somewhere else. He suggested to Subin that they follow them to find out what was going on, and Subin immediately agreed. In room 105, Seong-hyun was reading a book when So-heen suddenly entered. So-heen began stammering, nervously telling her brother that a strange man was bothering her. She explained anxiously that the man had asked her whether she had a boyfriend, while Woo-jin's face showed clear signs of shock. Seong-hyun began angrily repeating what his sister had said about the strange guy who suddenly approached her and tried to bother her, while Bor-yom and Subin stood outside the room, wondering if Woo-jin had gone in there. The door suddenly burst open, and Woo-jin came tumbling out onto the floor, while Seong-hyun stood inside, ready to fight. Woo Jin tried to calm the situation, saying they could talk things out peacefully, but Seong-hyun replied furiously that he preferred to express his anger this way. Boryum shouted, trying to stop what was happening, asking what Woo Jin had done this time. Woo Jin responded that he hadn't done anything wrong. Boryum shouted back more angrily, reminding Woo Jin that the girl had just woken up from a 12-year coma, meaning she was still a child, and forced him to apologize. Everyone moved into the room, where Boryum apologized for hitting Woo Jin suddenly, and So-hin also apologized shyly. Boryum asked about Seong-hyun's age and whether he was 17 like Subin. Subin introduced himself with a warm smile, saying he hoped they'd all get along. Seong-hyun replied with a bit of tension, saying he hoped so too. They all walked down the hallway together, and Boryum asked Seong-hyun if he was in the hunter division. Seong-hyun confirmed that he was. Boryum asked if there was any specific hunter he admired, and Seong-hyun replied that he was a bit influenced by his father, who was also a hunter. Subin noticed Seong-hyun's name and asked if his last name was Guy, then wondered aloud if he knew the famous hunter Guy Shin-baek. Seong-hyun replied calmly and confidently, saying that Guy Shin-baek was his father. Everyone was shocked and amazed, and Boryum asked in disbelief if that was really true. Boryum enthusiastically admitted that he was a huge fan of his father, and Subin said the same. They both recalled an image of Guy Shin-baek during one of his battles, where he looked extremely powerful and impactful. Everyone looked at Seong-hyun with admiration, and Boryum reaffirmed that his father was his role model. He explained that ever since he was a child, he dreamed of becoming a hunter too. Seong-hyun asked Boryum in surprise if he wasn't in the hunter division. Boryum replied that he was in the magical engineering division, ranked E, so he didn't have the chance to join the hunter division. Seong-hyun, somewhat shy, admitted that he himself was ranked F as well, which shocked them. But So-hin smiled proudly and said that her brother had still joined the hunter division despite being the lowest rank. Everyone was shocked again and asked Seong-hyun in disbelief how that had happened. Seong-hyun struggled to explain, nervously, but So-hin eagerly said that they were accepted through a special recommendation. Seong-hyun, annoyed by his sister's comment, told her with frustration that he had asked her not to tell anyone about the recommendation and began playfully pulling her hair in mock punishment. Boryum and Subin watched the scene from afar, smiling, and Boryum quietly remarked that the girl was being scolded in a gentle way. Seong-hyun gently patted his sister on the head, telling Boryum that even if she was of a low rank like E, she could still become a hunter if she put in enough effort, pointing to himself as an example. Elsewhere, Subin sat lost in thought, showing signs of discomfort as he quietly thanked someone. The ship sailed across the open sea under a clear blue sky, while Boryum was helping So-hin learn how to use something. Amidst the busy students on the deck, Seong-hyun stood alone on the deck, looking around with boredom. He suddenly noticed Subin standing alone at the side of the ship and wondered if he was feeling seasick. Subin curtly replied that he was indeed feeling it, and the two of them looked up together at a seagull flying overhead. Subin suddenly asked why he wanted to become a hunter. Seong-hyun tried to explain and mentioned his father again. But Subin clarified that he meant Seong-hyun's own mindset and personal motivations. Seong-hyun hesitantly replied that he wasn't sure of his true motivations. He also admitted that he had never really thought about a clear reason for wanting to become a hunter. Subin explained that when he watches the news, he sees many people becoming hunters without a deep reason, just to gain money and fame easily. He added that those people don't realize that being a hunter comes with many responsibilities beyond those benefits. Subin bluntly said that this is exactly why he hates hunters. Then Seong-hyun directly asked Subin why he chose to become a hunter despite that. Subin replied clearly and confidently that he wants to become a hunter capable of saving everyone. Subin surprised Seong-hyun by asking him not to come to the academy. Feathers fell around them unexpectedly, while Seong-hyun appeared stunned by Subin's words. Subin began to explain his perspective, saying that ordinary people's abilities do not develop no matter how hard they try, and that awakening powers is purely based on luck. He asserted that a person's rank, once determined at the beginning, never changes. He added that the academy requires extremely expensive tuition fees, which means a student must come from a wealthy family. Subin continued, directing his words to Seong-hyun, saying that someone like him, with a rich and famous father, would find it easy to study. Seong-hyun grew angry at Subin's words and responded with great frustration, explaining that he didn't come because of his family's wealth, but because his special abilities awakened late. Subin firmly replied that the awakening of powers has nothing to do with hard work or effort. He continued explaining that if someone suddenly gains an ability, It means they had it all along without knowing, and it just awakened by chance. Subin concluded by asserting that Seong-hyun's special recommendation and entry into the Hunter's department is proof of his point, and that they are both now on this ship thanks to the luck he was born with. Subin continued, saying that their presence in this place was purely due to luck, nothing more. He went on to explain that Seong-hyun's desire to become a hunter without acknowledging this obvious truth was simply stubbornness. He added with a sarcastic tone that believing everything would work out just through hard work was a mere illusion. His voice grew sharper as he addressed Seong-hyun directly, saying that trying to convince someone who had already given up his dream after being ranked E that he could succeed through effort alone was just misleading him. Seong-hyun recalled the words he had said earlier to Boryom, when he had encouraged him by saying he could become a hunter through hard work despite his low rank, and this memory made him hesitate. But then, angered by Subin's words, he shouted back furiously, calling him rude for saying that his thinking was no different than his sister's. Seong-hyun suddenly lunged forward, throwing a furious punch toward Subin's face. But the trajectory of Seong-hyun's punch changed unexpectedly before hitting Subin, as if something invisible had deflected it. Nearby, So-hin and Boryom heard the loud sound and asked in surprise what was happening. Subin calmly replied with a smile that Seong-hyun had stumbled and fallen, but he was fine. So-hin jokingly commented that her younger brother was always clumsy, while Seong-hyun silently wondered what had just happened. He recalled the moment his punch veered off course and realized something had suddenly appeared and altered its direction. Subin coldly remarked that people who start fights are the ones who tarnish the image of hunters, and that behavior like that is what truly harms the reputation of the entire profession. He then seriously advised Seong-hyun to listen to him and give up on his dream of becoming a hunter. Suddenly, a glowing chain wrapped around Subin's ankle, startling him. So-hin, surprised again, asked if there was something on the floor. Subin fell to the ground, trying to free himself from the chain with a look of irritation. Seong-hyun began speaking, explaining that yes, he had made it this far through luck, and maybe he didn't deserve to become a hunter, just like Subin had said. But he firmly declared that even so, he deserved a chance to become a hunter simply because he was here now. Seong-hyun asserted strongly that he would not leave this academy of his own will, no matter what. Subin warned him that even if he stayed, his low rank would make it extremely hard to survive. Seong-hyun confidently challenged him, saying they should meet at midnight to truly test their powers. Subin's expression changed, and he accepted the challenge with an angry look in his eyes. That night, the ship sailed through stormy waves and heavy rain as So-hin's voice echoed in her mind, telling herself that everything would be okay. She then remembered the fairy's words, telling her that hope never disappears, and that one day, it will definitely come. Suddenly, So-hin woke up from her sleep, her face showing signs of shock and sadness. She sat up in bed, looking out the window, quietly asking if what had happened was just a dream, and called out to her brother Seong-hyun. She stared silently at the empty bed next to her, deep concern showing on her face. Soo-hin walked down the dark hallway of the ship holding her phone, visibly worried as she wondered where her brother Seong-hyun was. Suddenly, she felt a hand touch her shoulder from behind, causing her to scream in fear. When she turned around in terror, she found Bayoreum, Woo-jin, and another student named Yoonbi. Woo-jin asked her, annoyed, why she was screaming so loudly and what she was doing in that place. Soo-hin looked at them in surprise and asked what they were doing there as well. Woo-jin explained that they were planning to head to another room to hang out with the other students, and Yoonbi, who was with them, asked who Soo-hin was. Bayoreum replied that she was a new student. Woo-jin stepped towards Soo-hin and kindly asked if she wanted to join them. Soo-hin hesitantly asked if they meant her, to which Woo-jin gently confirmed, and Bayoreum suggested it would be good to invite her so she could meet the new students before classes started. Soo-hin felt very happy and excitedly said she would love to join them, completely forgetting her earlier worry about her brother Seong-hyun. They all entered the new room with smiles, and Yoonbi told the others that they had arrived. Inside the room, 3 students were sitting among snacks, laughing loudly and talking about funny incidents. A girl with pink hair noticed the new group entering, welcomed them, and asked them to sit down. But Woo-jin looked shocked and upset when he saw one of the people there, and suddenly said he was going to leave. Yoonbi asked him worriedly why he suddenly wanted to go, and he angrily replied that it was because she hadn't told him that this person would be here too. Soo-hin didn't notice the tension, and instead smiled happily as she noticed all the snacks around the room. Woo-jin felt deeply frustrated as he looked at Soo-hin, and Bayoreum tried to defend himself, saying he wasn't the one who brought her there. The girl urged Woo-jin to hurry up and sit with them. Woo-jin eventually sat down after some hesitation, sighing in resignation as he said he would join them. The girl asked who Su-hin was, and Woo-jin quietly replied, placing his hand on Su-hin's head, that she was a new friend he had just met. Su-hin cheerfully raised her hand and greeted her politely. The girl coldly returned the greeting, while Byureum sat next to Su-hin, visibly nervous and silently observing the situation. Byureum nervously asked where Seong-hyeon was, and Su-hin replied that she didn't know, as he had disappeared when she woke up. Byureum silently recalled that he had also noticed Seong-hyeon missing from the room for some time. He remembered the earlier scene where Subin was talking to Seong-hyeon on the ship's deck, and he felt like something strange had happened between them then. He wondered to himself if there was some issue between Subin and Seong-hyeon, while heavy rain poured outside the ship. At that moment, Seong-hyeon appeared standing under an umbrella in the rain, looking surprised to see someone in front of him. That person was wearing a raincoat, and it was Subin. Seong-hyeon mockingly commented that the guy came out to fight wearing a raincoat, and Subin replied that it was raining, calling Seong-hyeon an idiot. Subin sarcastically asked Seong-hyeon why he was carrying an umbrella when he wouldn't be able to use it during a fight, and Seong-hyeon calmly replied that he wanted to avoid getting wet as much as possible. The two stood silently facing each other, each staring at the other with a clear look of challenge. Without saying a word, Subin stood under the rain, staring at Seong-hyeon, wondering to himself if the latter was truly stupid for coming to a battle in the rain, holding an umbrella. Subin sighed slowly as he extended his hand to activate his ability. A massive spiraling formation of water energy gathered in front of him, dazzling Seong-hyeon. Subin explained that his power draws its strength from the spirit of water, and that the rainy weather and proximity to the sea made the conditions perfect for him. He was now in a position of strength, as the spirit of water's power reached its peak in a place like this. Looking confidently at Seong-hyeon, Subin said that even he couldn't fully control his power, then warned him that he might die during the battle. Seong-hyeon threw his umbrella aside and prepared to fight using his chains, shouting angrily that Subin was the one who started this conflict. Subin calmly replied that it was no longer up to him, then summoned one of his water spirits through a glowing hexagram. Seong-hyeon got ready for battle, watching the magical formation intently. Subin unleashed a massive water blast towards Seong-hyeon, making the latter open his eyes wide in shock at the size of the attack. Seong-hyeon tried to dodge the attack, but was nearly hit directly and paused for a moment. Subin noticed the surprise on his opponent's face as Seong-hyeon tried to rise again. Seong-hyeon suddenly launched a glowing chain at Subin, exploding toward him in a quick and powerful strike. Subin was stunned by the sudden reaction and commented that it was unbelievable. He acknowledged that the skill was impressive for someone of F rank, though he hadn't expected it in that form. Still, he pointed out that the chain was weaker than real chains and didn't compare in strength or durability. Seong-hyeon asked in shock if Subin had more than one spirit, after noticing multiple spirits surrounding him. Subin confidently said that this chain wouldn't be effective in either attack or defense. He emphasized that, in both offense and defense, Seong-hyeon's current ability was completely insufficient. Subin launched a new attack, sending a powerful water wave forward that forced Seong-hyeon to run, trying to block it with everything he had. He finally managed to deflect the wave using a shield-shaped chain and sarcastically asked his opponent if that was all he had. Another explosive wave appeared in front of Subin, and Seong-hyeon challenged him, asking if that was his only strategy. Subin stood in the storm without moving and told Seong-hyeon that he hadn't noticed he hadn't moved a single step since the fight began. He told him that he still hadn't fully realized it yet, but he didn't belong here. Seong-hyeon bent down in the rain and tiredly said that he was right. He really hadn't moved even a single step. He smiled and said that's exactly why he hadn't noticed what was happening now. Subin's eyes suddenly widened when he looked down and found a chain wrapped around his legs. The chain shot up with force, lifting him high into the air as Seong-hyeon shouted angrily while launching his attack. Subin released his energy toward the chain, trying to break it before being crushed, yelling with intensity. Seong-hyeon struck him with the glowing chain with incredible force, lifting his body into the air amid the rain. Subin crashed to the ground, screaming, which made Seong-hyeon ask if his strategy was still boring. He continued emotionally, saying that the reason he kept repeating the same attack was because it was the only method he knew. Subin was lying on the ground, gasping, while Seong-hyeon stared at him mockingly and told him that he had only been pretending to be strong earlier. He then added that it seemed Subin's rank wasn't as high as he had made it seem before. Seong-hyeon continued speaking confidently, saying that if Subin's rank had truly been high, someone like him with a low rank wouldn't have been able to defeat him so easily. Subin's face was filled with anger and frustration as he heard those words. Subin stood up very seriously, deciding to use his full power this time. and began summoning glowing magical crystals in preparation for a strong attack. Seong-hyun noticed, and his facial expression changed to one of surprise and tension. Meanwhile, somewhere else, someone shouted furiously that what was happening was obvious cheating. Inside one of the rooms, a group of students were playing a board game based on the use of special abilities, and one of them was very happy to have received an SSS rank summoner character. Soo-hin noticed the game and asked in amazement what it was exactly. Bayram, surprised, asked if this was her first time seeing a board game like that. He then explained to Soo-hin that this wasn't just an ordinary game, it was specifically designed for ability users. He also explained that the game analyzes their abilities to create characters that match their true potential. Bayram began testing the device, placing his finger on it as it began analyzing his ability. Once the analysis was complete, a B-rank wizard character appeared, which amazed both Bayram and Soo-hin. One of the female students explained to Soo-hin that games like these are also used for practical training, and Soo-hin finally understood why Seong-hyun had brought the device with them. The student asked Soo-hin to try the device herself, and Soo-hin agreed with obvious curiosity. But when Soo-hin tried the device, no glowing colors appeared like they had with the others, leaving her confused and disappointed. Suddenly, a message appeared on the device saying that the fifth player's ability could not be analyzed. Then another message appeared stating that the fifth player was believed to be a returnee, which left Soo-hin in complete shock. All the students were stunned, their faces showing deep surprise and shock at the unexpected announcement. One girl, clearly envious, said she was jealous of Soo-hin for getting a hidden class, while another student focused on the fact that she was a returnee. One of the students asked in total disbelief if the news was really true. Soo-hin remembered when Ji-hyun had previously told her that she must hide the fact that she's a returnee as much as possible. In the end, Soo-hin looked on with deep confusion, wondering why it was so necessary to hide this truth from others. She remembered when Ji-hyuk had told her, as they were walking together toward the ship, that returnees from other worlds often come back with many problems, and he pointed at her, saying that she, for example, had lost 12 full years of her life. He continued, saying that many returnees are unable to adapt to society, and some of them end up committing various crimes. He added that the devices used to seal abilities usually don't work on returnees. He went on to explain that their powers are usually equivalent to those of S-rank hunters, which is why they are considered moving natural disasters. He also confirmed that returnees carry a bad reputation in society and advised Soo-hin to hide the fact that she's a returnee as much as possible. Soo-hin recalled his advice with fear, imagining how people would look at her if they knew she was a returnee. She began to grow anxious while sitting with the other students, who asked her with curiosity to share her story. Woojin asked her excitedly about her experience in the other world and showed great interest in learning what had happened to her there. The rest of the students joined the conversation eagerly, expressing their desire to hear her story too. Soo-hin felt extremely nervous and shyly asked one of the girls if she minded that she was a returnee, and the girl reassured her that she didn't care about things like that. Soo-hin tried to start speaking, lowering her head with clear nervousness. Her face showed a clear desire to share her experience, despite her shyness and hesitation. Another girl, smiling, casually asked if it was true that returnees fought demon kings and similar beings in those worlds. Then she asked a shocking question, whether Soo-hin had killed someone in that world. Soo-hin was deeply shocked by the question, and her expression instantly changed to fear and disbelief. Elsewhere, under the rain, Subin stood looking at Seong-hyun, who was lying on the ground in the ship's training field. Subin calmly told Seong-hyun that it was unfortunate because he had outperformed him in terms of tactics and strategy. He continued, saying that even so, he was the one who ended up on the ground in the end. Seong-hyun struggled to stand while listening to Subin's words. Subin spoke coldly, saying that power that comes easily is often much stronger than the power a person struggles to obtain. He continued, saying that some people give up on their dreams because of their low classification, and that others suddenly develop powers and gain opportunities that others can barely dream of. Sobin went on to explain that it's not just about abilities, but applies to everything in life. There are limits to what a person can achieve through willpower alone. He said that Seong-hyun would likely meet people at the academy who are stronger and more ruthless than him, and he told him that coming to the academy would only bring him suffering. Seong-hyun spoke with difficulty about his father, explaining that his father wasn't even an S-rank hunter, not even A-rank, and yet he was able to accomplish feats beyond most A-rank hunters, managing to clear many high-level dungeons. He continued speaking about his father, saying that he saved many people's lives. He went on shouting in anger that everything his father accomplished was through effort and perseverance alone, not because of any special power or high rank. Seong-hyun added sharply that even though he is an F rank, it's not up to Subin to decide whether or not he deserves to be a hunter. Subin replied to Seong-hyun's words coldly, saying he agreed, then added challengingly if he really knew much about his father's achievements. Subin suddenly asked if he remembered the S-rank gate incident that happened 7 years ago in Mapo. Seong-hyun was confused by the sudden question and asked Subin why he was bringing that up now. Subin continued, staring at Seong-hyun, saying that the incident caused major losses, and not all the victims died because of monsters. Seong-hyun shouted angrily, demanding to know why Subin was bringing that up, especially since no one ever talks about or criticizes what happened that day. Subin's expression changed to intense rage, and his body began to tremble with emotion. Subin began to speak with a shaking voice, saying there was a reason he was mentioning that incident. Then he shouted forcefully that his sister died in that place. He stepped towards Seong-hyun, yelling in fury that it was his father who killed her. Seong-hyun froze in place, feeling completely shocked and stunned by the sudden accusation. Subin continued shouting, angrily asking if his father had a reason for what he did. He asked bitterly and with intense anger if it was acceptable for hunters to sacrifice the few in order to save the many. Then he raised his voice again, asking whether a hunter wasn't supposed to protect everyone without exception. Subin paused for a moment, staring at Seong-hyun, who seemed unable to respond. He stepped closer and asked him directly, in a now calm voice, what exactly he was trying to achieve. He asked again, in a clearer tone, what the real reason behind everything Seong-hyun was doing was, and what kind of hunter he wanted to be. From a distance, an unknown figure silently observed the conversation between them. Meanwhile, inside the ship, the pink-haired girl, Shin Mi-jo, asked Soo-hin a shocking question, if she had ever killed someone before. Soo-hin was overwhelmed with confusion and began stammering, unable to respond. She suddenly shouted that she was going to the bathroom and quickly left the room. The students in the room remained, looking at her in surprise and confusion. Miho laughed, saying that Soo-hin was a funny girl, while Byuriam asked, clearly irritated, why she would ask such a question out of nowhere. Miho laughed and apologized, saying her question was indeed scary, then asked if Soo-hin was in the magical engineering department. Byuriam replied no, saying she was in the hunter department, which surprised Mijo. She smiled strangely and said that in that case, Soo-hin would not succeed in that field. She continued explaining that being a hunter wasn't just about hunting, they sometimes had to kill too, and that being a hunter means being capable of killing when necessary. She continued speaking, saying that everyone here knew exactly why they had come. Everyone remained silent in hesitation, and none of them responded to her words. From a distance, Soo-hin stood alone outside in the rain, gasping as she wondered if she could really survive in this place with such a mindset. Tears began to fall as she questioned why she had run away instead of facing the situation. She thought sadly that all she had to say was that she hadn't killed anyone, and she hadn't lied when she said that. She recalled that painful memory clearly, saying her heart still races every time she thinks of that moment. She felt that she didn't belong here, and that she didn't deserve to be among the others. Suddenly, a familiar face from the fairy world appeared in her mind. Cyan. She wondered sadly whether she could really make new friends in this place, when suddenly she was surprised by the sound of approaching footsteps. Another girl appeared, greeting her cheerfully with a smile, and said she was the girl she had met earlier. The girl kindly introduced herself as Mo Dan, and Soo-hin introduced herself shyly and nervously, saying she was Gai Soo-hin. Mo-dan asked Soo-hin with concern if she was okay and able to keep playing with them, and Soo-hin shook her head with clear confusion and hesitation. Mo-dan eagerly expressed her excitement to see Soo-hin's abilities, since it was her first time meeting someone with a hidden class. But Soo-hin politely declined, saying she didn't think she could show it right now. Soo-hin said sadly that she had thought she would succeed, but now she wasn't so sure anymore. Mo-dan responded with empathy, saying that she too felt afraid when she remembered a similar moment from her past. Then Mo-dan unexpectedly told Soo-hin that she had almost killed someone once too. Soo-hin was deeply shocked and asked in confusion and disbelief what exactly Mo-dan meant. Mo-dan explained that it had happened suddenly back in high school, when she lost control of her power. Still, Mo-dan said with enthusiasm that she continued to believe in herself, and that fear wouldn't change what had already happened. She went on confidently, saying that she would work hard to make sure something like that never happened again. The memory shifted once again to the past, where young Soo-hin was shown calling out Cyan again. Young Soo-hin asked the fairy Cyan, as she looked around the fairy world where the rock that was crying here had gone. Cyan replied gently and calmly that he didn't do anything except talk to the rock. The large rock appeared, crying intensely, with heavy water pouring from it like tears. Cyan explained that when the rock cried in pain, he shared his pain with it too. In the end, Cyan said the rock regained its spirit and left the place feeling happy. Young Soo-hin stood watching the rock as it rolled away, leaving a long trail behind. Cyan said softly that rocks, clouds, and even humans, they all shed tears in the same way. Soo-hin began to realize that everyone around her could become friends if they just made a little effort. She quietly agreed, confirming that Modan was right. Modan smiled and affirmed that all they had to do was try and work hard. Then she enthusiastically grabbed Soo-hin's hand and said she would explain everything on their way back together. Suddenly, they heard a loud sound of a large wave of water rushing toward them unexpectedly. Meanwhile, Subin was outside talking with Seong-hyun in the rain, asking him if he remembered the S-rank gate that appeared in Mappo 7 years ago. From afar, Soo-hin and Mo-dan watched the scene anxiously, and Soo-hin wondered what was happening over there. Subin continued angrily, saying that no one blamed Seong-hyun's father anymore for what happened that day, and that maybe he had his reasons. Then Subin suddenly shouted, revealing that his sister had died in that place. He added, even more furiously, that it was Seong-hyun's father who had killed her. Soo-hin was shocked upon hearing this, her face showing signs of horror and disbelief. She anxiously wondered what they were talking about, as she couldn't hear everything clearly. She felt a deep shock as she realized what had happened 7 years ago involving her father. She questioned internally whether her father had truly killed Subin's older sister. Subin continued speaking, asking what kind of hunter Seong-hyun wanted to become after reaching this point. Seong-hyun remained silent, feeling immense pressure. He quietly admitted that he had never really thought about the kind of hunter he wanted to be. Seong-hyun stated clearly that the only reason he was here was because of his personal admiration for his father. He added that this admiration wasn't something unique to him. Many people on the ship shared the same motivation, and that some students were here simply because they wanted to make friends. Seong-hyun recalled all the painful words that had been directed at him before, but he remained determined to become a hunter. Then he explained that if someone takes their goals seriously, that alone is enough to make them worthy of respect. And he added that in that regard, he was just like Subin. Energy flared up around Subin from sheer anger, as he shouted that Seong-hyun could never be like him. At that moment, Soo-hin and Mo-dan watched from afar in total shock. Seong-hyun quietly repeated that he was similar to Subin in the goal he was striving for. Subin replied with even greater anger, saying they were completely different, and began activating his power more intensely. He shouted Seong-hyun's name with fierce intensity. In the next moment, the two of them clashed with tremendous force, causing water and energy to explode around them. Seong-hyun and Subin began to fall to the ground after their violent collision, both showing signs of pain and shock from the impact. Subin coughed harshly, affected by the intense clash. Suddenly, a glowing water star appeared unexpectedly in front of Subin, leaving him stunned. The water star began glowing brighter and surged powerfully toward them, causing Seong-hyun to feel overwhelming fear and confusion. The force of the water star hit Seong-hyun with tremendous power, slamming him to the ground as Soo-hin and Mo-dan watched in worry and amazement. A strong beam of light appeared from the sky, heading directly toward the ship they were on, completely changing the atmosphere. At that moment, Seong-hyun looked around in surprise and concern at the sudden shift. Then the star shot quickly towards Seong-hyun and struck him, knocking him down. Subin groaned in pain on the ground from the powerful blow and said to himself that his head hurt terribly. Then Subin noticed in shock something strange happening to his powers. His water spirits were beginning to disappear mysteriously. Subin appeared dazed, wondering why his spirits were vanishing, while Seong-hyun rushed at him with force. Suddenly, Seong-hyun delivered a strong punch to Subin's face with all his might, causing droplets of water to scatter from the impact. Subin was startled once more when he realized that something had been placed on his hand during the clash. He noticed that what had been placed was a device used to seal abilities. A look of shock appeared on Subin's face as he asked himself when Seong-hyun had managed to put the device on him. Subin recalled a previous conversation between Seong-hyun and Soo-hin when he told her he had taken some useful things from his father's drawer. Subin collapsed to the ground, exhausted and in pain, while Seong-hyun sat, panting, saying he was extremely tired. Despite his exhaustion, Seong-hyun smiled with satisfaction and proudly said he managed to land a real hit on Subin. But Subin didn't stay down for long, and soon the two resumed their battle. Inside the ship, Soo-hin and Mo-dan watched the scene with concern, and Soo-hin said fearfully that what was happening outside looked very violent. Soo-hin turned nervously when she noticed someone approaching the battleground outside, wondering what was happening. Seong-hyun told himself as he threw another punch at Subin, that anyone who takes their goals seriously, no matter how small, deserves respect. Subin took another strong punch to the face, which made him stagger backward. Seong-hyun confidently assured himself that he was like Subin in determination and persistence. Subin began wondering angrily to himself whether Seong-hyun really was like him. In a flashback scene, young Subin appeared sitting amid destroyed ruins, tears running down his face. He continued sitting alone among the wreckage, feeling sadness and loneliness. He suddenly lifted his head as he saw scattered corpses around him in that painful memory. He began to recall that day with sharp clarity as he saw a pair of feet slowly approaching him. And finally he remembered himself running non-stop through the rubble on that difficult day. He was running, painfully wondering what had brought him to this state. He saw the ground around him absorbing blood endlessly, while the stars in the sky sparkled indifferently to what was happening. He continued crawling with great difficulty through the rubble and destruction, clearly exhausted and full of despair. He asked in deep sorrow why everyone had left him without offering any help. From a distance he saw a group of hunters walking away from him, not one of them turning to look. He cried out in anguish, asking why they ignored him even though they were hunters and were supposed to help. As he cried, he weakly whispered that the hunters should have been the ones to save him. Suddenly his older self appeared before him and gently said that he would take on that mission instead. He knelt before him and assured him that he would become a hunter who protects everyone, especially people like him. Then he confidently said that he would no longer leave anyone alone in this place ever again. Subin recalled those words and told himself that he was exactly like Seong-hyun. But then he corrected himself, saying that in truth, he was different from him. He wondered sadly why people only use their powers for their own interests. He addressed Seong-hyun directly, asking him to take things a little more seriously. Seong-hyun admitted that he didn't know the responsibilities of a hunter or what it truly required. He confirmed that he wanted to start learning those things now. He explained that this was the reason he came to the academy in the first place. Suddenly, a very loud sound was heard all around them. Both of them looked toward the source of the sound in shock and clear concern. They saw a mysterious person standing in front of them, holding a gun raised in the air. Seong-hyun cautiously asked who this strange person was. The scene shifted to just before the final moments of the fight between Seong-hyun and Subin. When the two girls saw what was happening outside, they said worriedly that the situation looked extremely dangerous. So-hin asked her newly acquainted friend what was going on outside. She was shocked and shouted out Byuriam's name loudly, realizing he was the one sneaking in. Byuriam fearfully asked them whether the two outside were really fighting, and So-hin replied that she had found them like that when she arrived. Byuriam shouted, trying to stop the fight, and asked one of the girls to call an adult immediately. With great concern, Byuriam said it seemed like the two outside couldn't hear him, and that one of them might get seriously hurt. So-hin screamed in terror as she imagined a horrifying scene possibly unfolding right in front of her eyes. So-hin began shouting that things couldn't continue like this, and that they had to stop Seong-hyun and Subin immediately. Byuriam asked her with visible concern how she could possibly stop them when they were in such a furious state. He told So-hin very seriously that intervening in a fight between ability users was extremely dangerous, like stepping into a gunfight. Worry and fear appeared on So-hin's face as she imagined herself stepping between Seong-hyun and Subin mid-battle. She suddenly imagined herself carrying out a bizarre and funny plan to forcibly take away their weapons. So-hin quickly suggested to Byuriam that they could just snatch the weapons from them. Byuriam firmly rejected the idea, saying that it was impossible and far too dangerous. He then added with great concern that the situation could turn catastrophic if the two continued fighting and Subin used his powerful water attack again. At that moment, Byuriam made an important decision and looked toward his bag with intense resolve. He asked So-hin to stay where she was and not move, which surprised her and made her wonder what he was planning. Byuriam took out a magical device from his bag that resembled a gun and decided to use it to stop the fight. Shock and fear appeared on So-hin's face as she watched Byuriam leap between Seong-hyun and Subin holding the magical gun. Seong-hyun and Subin paused for a moment, stunned by Byuriam's sudden intervention. Byuriam fired a magical shot into the air to get their attention and said, panting, that they had finally noticed him. He scolded them angrily for ignoring his repeated calls and now fighting using their abilities. Subin and Seong-hyun were both startled and shouted in panic, thinking that Byuriam was holding a real gun, not just a tool. Byuriam angrily asked them why they were acting so recklessly and what would have happened if the ship was damaged or the other students were hurt. Seong-hyun and Subin felt deep embarrassment and regret after hearing Byuriam's angry words. Bayuriam sighed as he held the magical gun, saying bitterly that he was surrounded by troublemakers. Suddenly, a mysterious person appeared behind Bayuriam and called his name sarcastically, making Bayuriam tremble in shock. Bayuriam turned around in terror when the mysterious person, Ji Hyuk, told him that magical devices were prohibited in the academy, no matter the reason. Ji Hyuk gave a chilling smile and told them that the three of them could expect to be punished for their actions. Seong Hyun felt frustrated and realized they were all in serious trouble. The next morning everyone arrived at the academy, and Woo Jin was seen saying sadly that he had lost the challenge. Woo Jin mockingly told Seong Hyun, Subin, Bayuriam, and Soo Hin that this was the first time in the academy's history that students were punished even before the semester began. Bayuriam apologized to them awkwardly, saying it was his fault for using the magical device. But he explained that the professor had asked him to bring the device, so there might be some flexibility with their punishment. Even so, Bayuriam said the real problem would be for Seong Hyun and Subin because of the fight between them. Bayuriam told them to head to their assigned dorm rooms, and Soo Hin asked in surprise if he wasn't coming with them. Bayuriam calmly answered that their dorms were different from his, which surprised Soo Hin. Seong Hyun began explaining the situation to Soo Hin, saying that Seonghan Academy doesn't have just one student dormitory. In fact, there are many residential buildings scattered all over the island, ranging from large to small. Soo Hin looked at a map showing the layout of the dorm buildings across the island and expressed her surprise at how many there were. She nervously recalled the pink-haired girl, hoping deep inside that she wouldn't end up in the same building with her. Seong Hyun pulled out his phone and started checking the name of the dorm they'd been assigned to, telling Soo Hin it was called Engsu Guan. Suddenly a suitcase slammed to the ground next to them, making them both turn around in surprise. When they turned to the source of the sound, they found Subin standing awkwardly in front of them with his suitcase. Seong Hyun and Subin exchanged an awkward, silent glance for a moment. Seong Hyun said with clear annoyance that he couldn't believe Subin would be living in the same dorm with them. Subin confirmed it silently and with embarrassment, explaining that they had indeed been placed in the same dormitory. At that moment, a smiling woman appeared beside a car and introduced herself as Ando Yoon, the supervisor in charge of the dormitory building. The students began introducing themselves one by one, with Modan being the most enthusiastic about her introduction. Ando Yoon complimented Soo Hin on her beauty, making her blush with both embarrassment and happiness, and Soo Hin sighed in relief that she wouldn't be with the pink-haired girl. Her joy grew even more when she suddenly discovered that Mo Dan was in the same dorm building as her. Soo Hin felt relieved and happy that she had managed to make a friend so quickly. She saw this positive beginning as a good sign for the start of the semester. Around 100 years ago, during an era of chaos caused by monsters and rogue ability users, a man had the idea to build an educational institution specifically for ability users. A few years later, he succeeded in founding a secret school on a remote island, hidden from the eyes of the Japanese occupation. This school later became known as Seonghan School for Special Abilities, also called the Hunter's School. It is the only school in Korea that allows anyone with special abilities to enroll, regardless of age, nationality, or background. Located on a southern remote island, the school might appear to some as just a rural academy in an isolated place. However, what makes the school exceptional is that its size is nearly equal to that of a whole island like Ganghwa. It boasts high-quality training equipment, diverse facilities, an extensive information network, and a modern infrastructure rivaling that of major cities. Thanks to these incredible resources, the school became a dream for anyone aspiring to become a hunter. And yet this girl, Soo Hin, entered the school without knowing anything about its prestigious reputation. She got ready for the opening ceremony and confidently told herself that she could tie her hair on her own without anyone's help. Seong Hyun entered the room and told his sister Soo Hin to hurry up, warning her not to be late for the ceremony. Soo Hin rushed out saying she was coming, as the first semester began and her new life at the school was set to start. The morning of the opening ceremony arrived at a dorm building called Bobby Hall. When Soo Hin arrived, Seong Hyun was waiting for her in front of the building, telling her she was finally late. Then Seong Hyun curiously asked about someone else's absence, while Soo Hin looked around, also wondering where that person was. Seong Hyun began asking why Subin was late, and Mo Dan replied that he said he needed to prepare for the opening ceremony. Seong Hyun wondered, confused, what exactly he needed to prepare for such an event. Mo Dan responded clearly, saying of course Subin had things to take care of. It turned out that Subin was this year's representative of the new students. He stood on stage in front of everyone and declared his commitment to the school's rules and regulations. Meanwhile, Seong-hyun watched the ceremony, feeling annoyed that someone who had been punished even before the school term began was speaking with such confidence. The look of frustration showed on Seong-hyun's face as he stood at the ceremony, having just been introduced as the second student to be disciplined. Seong-hyun continued thinking anxiously that Subin being chosen as the student representative meant he was the top-ranked among them all. He recalled the moment he witnessed Subin's water attack on the ship, realizing it was strong enough to resemble an A-rank attack. He started to feel nervous, imagining different scenarios. What if Subin hadn't hesitated during the fight, or had prepared his magic spheres, or had simply acted more rationally? Seong-hyun felt fear, realizing that he could have been the one lying on the ground instead of Subin. He realized that if he wanted to achieve his goal of joining the student council, as his father had once encouraged him to do, he would need to endure and persevere among these people. At that moment, Soo-hin was standing beside him, feeling very happy about being accepted into the academy, while Seong-hyun thought this was not the right time for joy. Soo-hin was also excited about the upcoming lessons after the ceremony, especially since it was her first time attending a hunter's school. The dorm supervisor, Ando, met Soo-hin and told her she needed to return to the dorm. Soo-hin was surprised and asked why, and Ando looked puzzled, asking if she hadn't checked her class schedule. Seong-hyun intervened, explaining that his sister had entered the academy without completing elementary school, so her academic schedule was different from theirs. Ando smiled and said Soo-hin would study with her to prepare for the equivalency exam during the morning period while the others were in class. Soo-hin grew anxious and asked nervously what exactly the equivalency test involved, and the student hesitated, unsure how to explain. Ando, still smiling, explained that the test included subjects like Korean, math, English, social studies, science, and Korean history. Soo-hin screamed in shock and absolute rejection of the idea. Seong-hyun said goodbye to his sister as she got into the car with Ando and asked the supervisor to take good care of her, to which Ando replied with a smile not to worry. Soo-hin's screaming continued as they drove off, while Seong-hyun began feeling irritated by his sister himself. The students began heading toward the Jinko Hall building for the start of class. Seong-hyun sat in the classroom, looking at the name of the subject they were about to study, which was Hunter Ethics, wondering what exactly they would be learning. At that moment, one student asked why the professor hadn't arrived yet, even though class was about to start in a minute. A fellow student replied that they should just wait a bit, since the professor always arrives precisely on time. When the time came exactly, the classroom door suddenly swung open with force. Everyone looked at the door in surprise, and a person entered dramatically riding on a hoverboard. The students, including Subin and Mo Dan, showed signs of surprise and confusion at the sight. The professor approached confidently, riding his hoverboard straight toward the students. He stopped, looked at the students with a confident smile, and greeted them in Japanese, saying he was happy to meet them. The professor with long black hair began introducing himself to the students, saying his name was Hagiwara Jin, and welcomed them to his class. He continued by saying that before starting the lesson, he needed to tell them one thing first. He hated this school. He explained that his hatred wasn't limited to just this school, but extended to most educational institutions, because they gather a large number of students into one classroom and give them all the same education, calling it the height of inefficiency. He further explained that the problem becomes worse when the students are ability users, each with their own unique personality. He added that ability users have stubborn principles that are hard to change. He gave himself as an example, stating that he always insists on absolute efficiency above all else. Continuing on the topic of efficiency, he posed a question to the students, saying that most monsters could be easily eliminated using modern military force, yet only hunters are sent into dungeons to take them out, and asked why that was. He answered his own question, stating that the reason is economic. Military power is extremely expensive. The professor explained that using weapons and tanks costs an enormous amount, far more than the profits gained from selling the magic stones retrieved from dungeons. In contrast, ability users with high physical capacities are extremely cost-effective, even if all they do is eat and sleep. He went on to say that the hunter profession was established primarily because of economics, and that in the end, everything comes down to money. He pointed out that the reason they are called hunters instead of heroes lies in that very truth. He then added that money isn't the only cost associated with hunters. There's also the physical and mental toll taken during battle. The professor explained that the most important thing in a battle is using the least amount of energy possible, moving efficiently, and choosing the best strategy. He emphasized that misusing energy in combat is foolish, and there's nothing more foolish than dying from exhaustion in the middle of a fight. He stated that the ability to make wise decisions is the most important trait a hunter must have. The professor then walked up to a student sitting in the front row and asked him directly about his ability category. The student grew nervous and replied that he was a construction mage. The professor continued questioning him, asking if he knew the range of his ability. The student replied that it was about 100 meters at most. The professor then asked if he could deconstruct materials physically. The student hesitantly said he had never tried. The professor fired more questions rapidly about the amount of weight the student could manipulate, the speed of his control, and the common properties between the materials he could handle. When the student failed to answer, the professor declared sternly that this meant failure. He scolded the student harshly, saying that someone who doesn't understand their own abilities can't assess others' abilities or form any strategy. Then the professor turned to Seong-hyun, who looked visibly tense, and addressed him as the curly-haired one. Seong-hyun was surprised and hesitantly asked if the professor meant him. The professor responded by demanding that he state his ability category. Seong-hyun hesitated and didn't answer right away, prompting the professor to angrily ask why he was silent. Seong-hyun finally admitted in a low voice that he didn't know anything about those topics. The professor's face showed clear signs of anger upon hearing Seong-hyun's response, which shocked and frightened the students in the classroom, especially Subin. After class ended in one of the school hallways, Seong-hyun heard a voice calling his name and turned toward it. He was surprised to see Subin yelling at him and asking furiously if he had lost his mind. Seong-hyun was confused and didn't understand why he was so angry. Subin continued, furious and incredulous, asking what it meant that Seong-hyun didn't even know his own ability category and how he could already be causing problems on the very first day. Seong-hyun replied nervously, saying it was the first time he had ever heard terms like category or construction mage, which was why he said he knew nothing. Subin's expression shifted from anger to shock as he began to realize something and asked with surprise if Seong-hyun really meant he knew absolutely nothing about any of this. Seong-hyun looked at him silently and nervously, unable to respond right away due to how embarrassed he felt. Bayram suddenly cut in and ended the conversation, telling Seong-hyun with frustration and disappointment to forget it and figure it out on his own. Seong-hyun was left standing alone in the hallway, feeling embarrassed and confused by what had just happened. The nearby students noticed that something strange was going on and looked on with puzzled and curious expressions. At that moment, Seong-hyun felt deeply anxious and told himself he had no idea at the time what consequences his actions would lead to in the future.